Hello and welcome back to 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your producer, Jeremiah Long, and joining me to talk about this week's Super College football game previews are two men that need no introduction, but nonetheless, I'm going to give them one. And the reason I'm going to give them one is because of the amount of respect that not only that they have shown me, but that they show our audience every single week as we come to you and bring you the best information about college football, the NFL, and everything that's happening from high school all the way into the post career of these incredible players. So, first off, we've got Mr. Football himself, the football encyclopedia, and one of our founders, Mr. Vincent Turner. And handing off now and getting it started with our incredible show is the man himself, Mr. Harper LeBel. How's it going, guys?
Thank you, Jeremiah. Appreciate it. What a great weekend. Number one is in the book now. Week 0, that was over. And now it's the real stuff. Everybody got a chance to play. Vincent, the Burner Turner, I'm telling you, Professor, we've got a lot of action to talk about today. Tell me specifically, who impressed you in week number 1 in the NCAA level?
I'm going to say this. I was at Buffalo Wild Wings Saturday watching the Miami and Florida game. A lot of Miami fans were in the place. At least I'm going to count 40 people. And I'm going to tell you that the U might be back. Yeah. Out of all the performances this college football weekend, Cam Ward, remember that name. Everybody else talking about it, everybody across the country, their Heisman favorites. I have never seen a quarterback have command of an offense at that level in the opening game of college football weekend. And Cam Ward, 385 yards against the University of Florida. I believe he had 3 touchdowns. I don't want to cheat him. But when you look at what he done and just the command of the offense, Harper, how he just played within the system, the poise, it like it was a guy playing against small kids in the neighborhood. So that was my most impressive performance from this weekend. And I'm going to tell you what, Russell Maryland, Michael Irvin, Gino Torretta, Dan Morgan, Jerome Brown, your former teammate with the Philadelphia Eagles, Ed Reed, Ray Lewis. I'm sorry if you don't like the U, they're back. They are back. Well, they got a quarterback.
Some people that are sorry that the U is back is Florida. Is it a hot mess down there? Can you walk around in the swamp? You have thin skin, and you're a head coach. That's not a good place to be. Billy Napier is having some trouble right down there.
I'm going to tell you this. I think Billy Napier is a hell of a football coach. Did a great job at Louisiana. Was a assistant under Nick Saban. A hell of a quarterback when he played in college at Furman. Very good guy. What I heard on the streets is that the guy is real likable. A lot of people like him out there. But one thing, when you take your first college job, you got to be really careful. Florida right now is taking a step back. I know Gator Nation don't want to hear that, but they have. Dan Mullen might have done a good job in certain areas. Let's be real, Harper. He didn't recruit. And he tried to build Florida like he did in Mississippi State. Now, he had some success with Dak Prescott, got him to number 1 during that time. But when you get to Florida, man, you got to you got to keep them ties in Florida. And Dan Mullen, that's why he got ran out. And that's why Billy Napier had to go in. And he's in a real tough situation, Harper. It's going to take at least 4 strong years to get that program back. And then you're in a tough SEC where Oklahoma and Texas has came in. But I would say this. Billy Napier, if he really want to try to at least save his job, you got to make a quarterback change, man. You don't have nothing to lose. You got to go with DJ Legway, the number 1 quarterback recruit in the class of 2024. You don't have nothing to lose. But if you don't, Mr. Harper LeBel, California YA, he's going to be the first coach fired after at least 5 games this year. I don't see him making it to game 5.
It's an interesting philosophy because there's so much money that's involved with removing one coach and having to bring in another. That's a part of the dynamic as well. You don't have to leave the state of Florida, and you can just pick guys off of trees in terms of recruits and And that's at the high school level, but you've got to hit the portal. A team did not hit the portal. Clemson and Dabo Swinney said, we are not doing it that way. They were on the wrong end of a train wreck. University of Georgia went just right down the street from us here at Mercedes-Benz and proved why they are the number one team in the nation. What impressed you about that game, Vincent?
We talked about this several times. When you look at Georgia, you look at that football team. This game, in my years, my 64 years, that Georgia team right now has got similarities to the 72 USC Trojans. I'm just keeping it real. Or the Miami Hurricanes in 2001. That football team is built from top up to top down. The offensive line is excellent. The defensive line is excellent. The quarterback, Carson Beck, plays under poise. They got a staple of running backs. They're very loaded with NFL talent on the outside. And when you look at that football game Saturday, you knew Georgia was going to make their move somewhere in that football game and really take over. They came out sluggish kind of in the first two series, but you kind of really understood what Mike Bobo, the offensive coordinator, was doing. He was just letting the game come to him because he knew that they had more talent. And when you talk about talent, the one thing that's been more impressive to me over the years since Kirby Smart has been there, he had one philosophy. And Harper, you being a former player at the highest level with several teams in the National Football League and then your outstanding career at Colorado State, when we was growing up and you start first playing this game, what are the basics when you go to that first coaching hat? He said football is built. He doesn't talk about the quarterback. He doesn't talk about the receivers. The game is won at the line of scrimmage.
Trenches.
And Kirby,
Trenches.
and think about what Kirby Smart has done. He came in on philosophy, even more better than Nick Saban. I'm just saying it. Look at the line of scrimmage. Broderick Jones, Steelers. Andre Thomas, the Giants. Trayvon Walker, Jacksonville. Jordan Davis, Georgia. Devontae Wyatt, the Green Bay Packers. Amarius Mims, Cincinnati Bengals. All of them have one commonality: first-round draft choices.
Yep.
And Georgia's offensive line this year, you can go check the tea leaves. Every player from Tank Ratledge, Ernest Green on the offensive line is projected to go in the first two rounds when they get ready to come out. And then now I think Kirby has the best quarterback under center that he's had. No disrespect to Jake Fromm, no disrespect to Stetson Bennett, but Carson Beck is a legitimate NFL prospect.
Yeah, he's a real deal.
Now, as far as Clemson, Dabo Swinney. And I like Dabo. You had a great run when you had Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence. Our gentleman here, Harper LeBel, saw Deshaun Watson playing high school in his great high school career. But the thing, I looked at Clemson, and I don't have too much of Dabo saying he's not going into the portal. But what stuck in my mind most about the Clemson Tigers on Saturday, what has happened to the offensive players that you had, Dabo, over the years? DeAndre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, T. Higgins. What has happened that Clemson has taken a step back offensively? And that's what really puzzles me. It's not so much Dabo not getting into the portal or Dabo doing his way. What has happened to the offensive production for Clemson over the last couple of seasons? And Cade Klubnik has to play at a high level if Clemson is going to move on. And he just not has played well. And if you look at this game and look what happened this past weekend, look at all the major teams. Cam Ward, Hayes King, that you saw up close and personal, Harper. Miller Moss last night with USC. Gary Nussmeier with LSU. What did they have in common this past weekend? They played at a high level. Flawless.
And their offensive line protected them.
There you go.
Talk about the trenches. Their offensive line, give any quarterback time to throw, and he will. And there were some other, you mentioned that LSU game. Man, talent all over that field. That to me, because the game goes down to the wire, not only was it a fun game to watch, but you're thinking at the next level, who's going to be ready in 3, 5, 8 weeks to take the next step and to help them. They both look like they were college playoff teams. and they were having playoff game number 1 in week number 1. But they'll both be forces. Don't be disappointed at LSU. Someone has to lose. It just so happened to be you. You're going to be a force in the SEC West.
I came out with a lot of respect for Lincoln Riley. Been under a lot of pressure the last 2 seasons, having the Heisman Trophy candidate Caleb Williams not advancing to the college playoffs. Came into this season, there was a lot of talk. If USC took some steps back going into the Big Ten this season, the pink slip might be coming out. Because if you look at Lincoln Riley, we all know that he can coach offense. But what puzzles me the most is that you now had a defense at an elite level, even when you was at Oklahoma. You had great offenses, and in this game, you got to be able to stop some people. As far as Brian Kelly, I'm going to say this. You lost your last 3 season openers since you've been the head coach at LSU. Now, Brian Kelly has taken that kind of same role that he did in Notre Dame. Get Notre Dame at what I want to say, tease you that you got a national championship club. But some way down the line, you seem to blow big games with your coaching. And last night, since you brought up USC and LSU, Harper, let's be real, LSU should have won that football game. They had plays to be made in that game. Last night, the targeting penalty at the end of the game was crucial. To me, when your players don't play big and big moments and make bad moves like that, that goes back to coaching. And if you look at the last touchdown that USC scored last night with Mr. Woody Marks, and I'm going to tell you about him in a few seconds, the safety who came in and replaced the guy on the targeting call, what was he at, Harper? He was what we call in the neighborhood out of position. Go back and look at the play.
Yeah.
But Woody Marks, I'm very, very happy for the young man. People don't know he's at Mississippi State. The young man played high school football here, Harper. He played at Carver High School, not far from Mercedes-Benz. Went to Mississippi State, and now look what he's doing on the national level last night for the mighty USC Trojans.
They're picking them from all over the place. It doesn't matter what part of the country. If you're good, you'll be seen. That's one of the great hopes that a high school senior has in terms of the recruiting status and where you are. We've talked a little bit about the portal. Obviously, we're looking at some of the big games. Any other players that you had in particular that you want to give a shout out to?
Of course, if I had to give out a shout from the state of Tennessee, I'm not going to butcher his last name, Nico I. What a performance he did for the University of Tennessee this past weekend in a 69-3 win over UTC. This gentleman has a chance, I think, with his abilities and go back and look at the film. I think he might be in the same realm of a T. Martin or a Peyton Manning or a Condrich Holloway. But you know who he remind me of? Tony Robinson, 85 University of Tennessee, slinging that rock. The young man,
back in my era now, 85. That's a good year.
You know about Tony Robinson when he made the cover of Sports Illustrated when that great upset win over Auburn at that time when Auburn was ranked number 1. They had Bo Jackson. Well, remember, Tony Robinson was one of the best college football players that I seen up close and personal. And think about that team he had: Tim McGee, he had Eric Swanson, Joey Clinksdale. But Nico I puts me in the mind of him. And of course, Harper this morning, I'm so excited. My University of Memphis Tigers, 40-0 over North Alabama. Shouts out to the 901. I love you, Mama, Daddy, Chester, Inez. I know the Memphis program is at that level. I'm so sorry.
13 minutes into the show, and then we had to bring up Memphis. We had to do it, Professor. We had to get that Memphis connection in.
Absolutely, man, because when you look at Memphis, I'm going to call them Memphis State this morning. I never in my dream ever thought the University of Memphis would be mentioning anywhere near talking about college football, playing in the playoffs for a national championship. It's a basketball school, but kudos to all the gentlemen that set the tone. Eric Harris, Keith Simpson, Lloyd Patterson, Turdale Militant, Keith Wright, Keith Butler. Thank you. And finally, give it back to you, Harper. You know that I was very excited this weekend. They got a big football game that's on our Super 7. I'm not going to call the Hogs this morning, but T. Green is the real deal. I'm pulling for Sam Pittman. I hope the University of Arkansas back. And plus with John Calipari up there coaching, who knows? This might be the year of the surprise of the Hogs. Bobby Petrino, I still love you, even though you might not be loved down here in Atlanta. But the Hogs, they might be back. Big game against Oklahoma State. Very pleased of the quarterback play for Mr. T. Green this past weekend as Arkansas beat UAPB 70-3.
Yeah, that was a huge win for them and get it started. And you mentioned LSU, and I'll just do this very briefly, how they're not playing these cupcake games. They're not playing opponents that are at a lower level. That was a playoff team, or it could be a playoff team. And it was a great game. You end up losing, and you still have Alabama. You've got Oklahoma and Texas in your division there in the SEC. It's going to be tough. But, we had 65 games, and you had 65 winners and 65 losers. But last week it got us kicked off and started. Let's look a little bit at some of the local action that's going to take place coming here this week. We're looking forward to all of the games that are going to be happening here for representatives in the state of Georgia. Starting with Tech at noon, they go to Syracuse. How about 2-0 Georgia Tech? I was there at that game against Georgia State last week. The atmosphere, the vibe, if you will, the band, the cheerleaders, the student body, and the alumni, just people wanting to take us to see the game. There is something exciting happening at Georgia Tech right now. Haynes King is the main reason why. He was unbelievable. Real quick stat about him, Vincent. 24 out of 29 in terms of passing. There were 3 deflections that I counted. There could have been a fourth, a ball that was deflected and fell to the ground and didn't hit the receiver. If I'm just conservative and say there were 2, that's still 24 for 27. They were catching the ball all over the place. Haynes King is a difference maker.
When I think about Georgia Tech right now, you got to give respect to Brent Key. He saved the program, man. Unfortunately, Jeff Collins had that program going backwards, and I like Jeff Collins. I still think he's a good football coach, but Brent Key has brought another type, I want to say, a lunch pail mentality. What Georgia Tech should have been and has been over the years, even back to the days of Bobby Dodd, just keeping it real, when they were winning national championships in the 40s and 50s. And then even though a lot of people say Georgia Tech was the little sister to Georgia, but they still had great players that came through that program. Eddie Lee Avery, to speak of, Joe Hamilton. So I'm glad to see Georgia Tech back on that level, being 2-0, having a big win over Florida State, because when it's Georgia Tech is good, it makes podcasts and shows like this. It's better for us when they win it. They're going up to Syracuse, though. This is what I want to see about Georgia Tech. You got the nation looking at you, all eyes, but Syracuse is a different type of animal under Fran Brown. This past week, Syracuse in their 38-23 win over Ohio, Fran Brown threw some shots at Ryan Day at Ohio State. And he said, "Thank you for letting us have Kyle McCord. I'm going to send you a bottle of champagne." So what I'm thinking is, okay, Fran Brown, he was the secondary coach for the University of Georgia. That's a little cockiness, don't you think, on Harper? So I'm thinking, hold your horses, Fran. Hold your horses. Pump the brakes. Because the way he was talking in the press this past weekend after the win over Ohio, I'm thinking to myself, okay, Mr. Coach Brown, you playing a Georgia Tech team coming 2-0, right? But you talking like Syracuse was back in the days of Ernie Davis, Floyd Little, Jim Brown. Hold up now. But I'm going to see Georgia Tech, big football game. Tech go 3-0, then maybe we start hearing the 404, start talking about them being a college football playoff team.
Yeah, they've got a long way to go, but I love the way you mentioned earlier in the show about the offensive line. They're big up front. They're bigger on defense in the front. That allows you to do a lot of things that you can't do if you're small. You don't have to rely on speed only, and speed only will wear you out in the third and fourth quarter, and then you have to rely on size, and Georgia Tech certainly has that. They've got a lot of young, big linemen. They are impressive. Mercer at Bethune-Cookman. That game is at 1 o'clock, and Tennessee Tech ends up bringing all their smarts and their degrees and a bunch of really intelligent individuals to the University of Georgia. They'll be playing between the hedges.
Well, I'm going to say this. Tennessee Tech, you coming down from Cookeville, you're going to get a nice check.
Yeah,
And,
as you will.
and you're gonna play the number one team in the country. In games like this, me looking as a player and a coach, and you played on a high level, Harper. I just hope that you don't lose key players in a game like this. That's all I'm saying. But Tennessee Tech is gonna get a nice check, and UGA is gonna keep rolling.
Yeah, for season ticket holders at University of Georgia, this is the weekend you help out the family by offering your tickets to your aunt and your uncle. You've got other folks that you want to do, but you're right. It's a check game, but that's okay. Tennessee Tech will see Georgia's third and fourth string probably before half, I would think, but it depends. Georgia has to play hard. Your starters need to play well. Get 4 touchdowns, and then you can start pumping the brakes a little bit. Valdosta ends up going to Newberry College this week. That game is at 4 o'clock. And then the rest are evening games. UT Chattanooga, the Mocs, will be coming here to Atlanta. They'll be playing at Georgia State. Any thoughts?
Dan McGee, I hope you get your first win. I thought Georgia State, and you was there. A lot of people don't know here on 100 Yards Football, Mr. Harper LeBel now became part of the staff. But you know what his part-time job is? He's the color guy. We never announced it for Georgia State football. So, yeah, if you want to know anything about Georgia State, this man has inside scoop. Hoping that the Panthers get their first win under Dale McGee.
Yeah, they did a couple of things that were impressive against Tech, but they made some critical mistakes. They had 2 first and goal from the 1 yard line situations in the first half, and they only came away with 3 points. First time they got stopped on downs. The second time they had to settle for a field goal. But they did move the ball a little bit, a lot of drops, and that'll change. But very impressed with Christian Valle. He is a legitimate quarterback. He came from Pitt. State will be absolutely thrilled to have him, and things will change for them throughout the course of the year. But hopefully, I agree with you, they get their first win against the Mocs. Louisiana goes to Kennesaw State, and Georgia Southern. One of the things I want to talk about is they ran into a buzzsaw in Boise State, at least from the ground game. Georgia Southern ends up to Reno, and they'll be playing at Nevada. Your thoughts?
Real quick, I think Georgia Southern needs to kind of tighten up on their defense. They gave up, 687 yards of total offense, 397 yards rushing, 9.9 yards of play. I don't have to say no more, do I, Mr. Harper? Tighten up your defense because you're going to be playing a good Nevada team that played SMU close in the first game to kick off this college football season in week 0, and they beat a good Troy team last week, 28-26.
Yeah. Well, in the final, the late game on Saturday for the local teams, West Georgia goes to Abilene Christians. That'll just be the first time some of those guys, especially the youngsters, get on a plane. They'll be going to Texas. It's a little bit hot out there. We all know that. But good luck to the West Georgia Wolves. Now let's take a look at some of the action that we want to specify, game that we want to look at. We call it the Super 7. Let's start with what I think is the biggest game of the weekend, at least in terms of the rankings, and what can we expect to see in terms of a better challenge. Texas goes to Michigan. They're both in the top 10. Vincent, your thoughts about what's going to be happening at the Big House?
I think the game is much important to the people coming up from Austin. Steve Sarkisian has built a culture. The culture is, hey, we want to win championships. We're going to come into the SEC and we're going to handle our business. They're playing against the defending national champions, the Michigan Wolverines. We know Michigan is a different football team. They struggled against Fresno State, really pulled away in that game in the fourth quarter. But what I'm going to take from it, I want to see Texas. Everybody's saying Texas is back to the days of James Street, Earl Campbell, Vince Young. That's what Texas is saying now. They wanted to come into the SEC. They had a big win over Alabama last season. They made the college football playoffs. They got a star quarterback in Quinn Ewers. They got the greatest backup in the world of college football, Arch Manning. I want to see what the Longhorns are going to do. All eyes on them because we know Michigan took a step back. They lost so many players to the NFL. J.J. McCartney, Blake Cohen, Sharon Moore. He's replacing Jim Harbaugh. House money is with the Wolverines, but I really want to see what Texas had as a football team in this one. Are they a legitimate national championship quality?
Well, Texas beat Colorado State Rammies. They shut them out 52-0. They scored 7 touchdowns and a field goal. And then Michigan had a little bit of I'm not going to say a hard time, but it was 30-10 was the final. I think some Wolverine fans are going, that wasn't impressive enough, but we'll see. Offensive line, if you're going to watch this ball game at 12 o'clock on Fox, be sure you watch Michigan's offensive line. All new. Every one of them. They got 5 new starters there. So that's going to be a tough replacement in terms of, you got a national championship level offensive line. All 5 of those guys ended up getting signed by the NFL teams. Big game though in Ann Arbor. You have to win that if you're at home, and if you pull an upset, which really isn't an upset for Texas when you're the number 4 team in the country, but that'll be a good game. Let's go down to Stillwater, Arkansas. Your boys there from Arkansas, your alumni, against Arkansas State. They're ranked number 17. Both are 1-0, and that will be a 12 o'clock game on ESPN Plus.
Hey man, big game for the University of Arkansas. I'm pulling for Sam Pittman. T. Green, new quarterback in the system. You saw what he did last week. I just mentioned a few minutes ago. It brings me back in the days when I was on the hill at the University of Arkansas up in Northwest Arkansas, when Arkansas was playing Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma State had Jimmy Johnson that was the head coach, and Lou Holtz was the head coach at Arkansas. Jimmy Johnson was at Oklahoma State. And I was thinking about that great Oklahoma State team back in the time, and I saw when Oklahoma State used to come down to Little Rock, hot, in the stadium, the Hogs calling. I'm looking at the Oklahoma State team. I'm looking at Dexter Manley, John Corker. And then I'm looking at Arkansas, my first year as a true freshman, Dan Hampton. Hello. Gary Anderson, Thomas Brown. Hey, what more can you say? That's a game I'm going to be watching. And don't get me wrong, that's a good Oklahoma State team under Mike Gundy. They got the best running back in the country, Ollie Gordon III, phenomenal football player. But this game, another game that a lot of teams are trying to prove that they on that, I want to say, college football playoff level, going to be very interesting. And of course, Harper, I got to go with the Hogs.
Of course. There's no doubt about it. But we did have them on our Super 7 this week. Another game that if you're at the State Fair, if you're between Ames, Iowa, and Des Moines, you're paying attention to this. This is your national championship. It's always early in the season. I love the fact that it's just one of those games that you just want to smile and watch at 3:30. Iowa State at Iowa. Your thoughts, Vincent?
Want to see what this Iowa football team is. They changed offensive coordinators in last year. Kirk Ferentz son got fired over there down in Iowa City, University of Iowa. This Iowa team over the last few years in the Big Ten has really struggled offensively. We know they can play defense. Cade McNamara, who was at Michigan 2 years ago, who lost a job to J.J. McCartney, had a very excellent first game. Well, he was 21-31, 253 yards. He hit 7 different receivers in that game as they beat Illinois State 40-0. Very interesting to see where Iowa is on the national level. And, of course, Iowa State, the home of Brock Purdy, the home of Bryce Hall. What more can you say? Rivalry game. I thought the head coach, Matt Campbell, be gone now. Remember Harper a couple of years ago? He was the hottest thing in sliced bread. A lot of people was really excited what he was doing over in Ames. And then they kind of tailed off. Iowa State has been kind of like a middle of the pack team in the Big 12. But rivalry game, I'm going with Iowa, man. I like what Cade McNamara did in the first game this season.
Let's skip the Boise, Oregon. We'll talk about that in just a second. Next on the list, at least in terms of time, when it starts, 3:30 on ESPN Plus, Tennessee goes and plays at the Wolfpack at North Carolina State. Obviously, your Tennessee Volunteers, they're 1-0. They need another big win here on the road.
Battle of the quarterbacks, man. North Carolina State last week had an impressive win over Western Carolina. We know what Tennessee done last week in the opening game. Josh Heupel, this is the year I think Tennessee is going to surprise some people. North Carolina State over Dave Doreen. He's saying that North Carolina State is now a college football playoff team. This is a huge game because it's got college football playoff aspirations. And I think, of course, I got to go with the University of Tennessee. But I think it's going to be a real close football game.
Yeah, of course you do. You can't go anywhere else. All right, let me look at my notes here. Next, we'll talk about CU going to Nebraska. Boy, back in the day, we know what the game would have meant. Let me look at my basic statistics here from Coach Prime's son, Shador Sanders. How about this for a day? Now, he only had 17 yards rushing, and CU only rushed for 59 yards. That was an interesting stat, but it really may not be anything when you stop to think that Shador Sanders was 26 for 34, 445 yards in the air, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, and he averaged 13.1 yards per completion. One of those receivers was Travis Hunter. We wanted to mention him from the get-go in terms of a big game last week. 7 receptions, 132 yards. He averaged 18.9 yards per catch. He had 3 touchdowns. That's not all, though. Real quick, let me just go over Nebraska. If you're a Cornhusker, you got to be a little happy about this rookie, this new kid, this freshman from Buford, Georgia, Dylan Raiola. 19 out of 27, 238 yards for him, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. A little bit less than what Shador Sanders did. But Nebraska, if they can play around this young man, they've got talent all over the field. Vincent, your thoughts?
Last week when Colorado played North Dakota State, right? They had 5.6 million that watched that game on Thursday night. There's no question about it. Saturday night on NBC at 7:30 is going to be must-see TV. I'm expecting that game is going to break numbers. You got 2 coaches. You got the prime man, Mr. Deion Sanders. Like Deion or not, what he's done at Colorado has been amazing. I mean, as far as bringing a national feel to that program, just the money, the excitement. Let's be honest. Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes are good for college football right now. And you playing at Colorado State, you should know what that situation is in Boulder, what's going on. Then you got Nebraska that's trying to get back to the days of Jerry Taggy, Johnny Rogers, Rich Glover. And you got a man that Matt Rule, who's kind of like, he said, give me an opportunity. My first year, Nebraska went 5-7. Now he's got the quarterback that you just mentioned, Harper. You don't think both of them teams, they kind of nervous? They're excited, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Raiola. That's what I say, great on great. Power on power. It's going down in Lincoln, Nebraska on Saturday night. And the greatest thing, I've seen a lot of great college football players come through college football that's been dual guys. From the days of Tommy Casanova, to Charles Woodson, to Champ Bailey, to Brad Van Pelt, to George Webster, Rod Woodson at Purdue, and of course, Deion Sanders at Florida State. I would say this, and I'm going to be very careful with my words. If Travis Hunter continues on the pace he's going, playing plays and making plays, both offensively and defensively, it's hard to say he might not be the greatest college football player that's played college football in the history of this game. And that's been a lot of great players. So it's must-see TV. And all I'm going to say is this. I'm not going to pick a winner because I think both teams are even. I think both teams need this game to move up in the college football playoff conversation. That's right. I think both of them are outside. I think they're on the same level of USC. When we talking about teams that are knocking at the door, one of the most anticipated games in my life, Colorado and Nebraska. And with the history, it's going to be a hell of a football game, man. In Colorado, Bill McCartney, your days might be coming back. Eric B., Darren Hagen, oh my God, it's going to be must-see TV going on in Lincoln, Nebraska. And to you, Mr. John Freaky, I know you're excited. Back to you, Mr. Harper.
He is. I think John's got a bunch of lumps on his head like Flintstone from all the jumping around that he did, getting excited about watching his team again. And the big issue for me, and I'm going to use this one word, relevance, is Nebraska relevant again if they win this game? I'm thinking the change that they need and they've wanted for years. Same with CU. That's what Deion wanted to do there, make their program relevant. I'll tell you what, if you go 0-2 at Clemson, you're not going to be relevant. Appalachian State, who upset Michigan 15 years ago and is still getting checks and residuals from that, they're going to go to Clemson. I'm not saying there's going to be an upset, but I think Clemson needs to turn it around and get it right, especially now. They don't have time to wait. Vincent, your thought about Appalachian State coming from Boone, heading there to Clemson, South Carolina?
As we say back when you're at the crap tables, if we was in Vegas, Appalachian State is playing with house money. Very good football program. You're looking at a Clemson team right now, as I just mentioned earlier in the show, is that they have a lot of problems on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, they're there. They're always going to be good. Pete Woods, the outstanding sophomore defensive tackle, had an outstanding game against Georgia. He's going to be one of them guys that you're going to talk about at a high level when he gets to the NFL. But when I look at Clemson, my main concern is where has the offense gone? And like I said, we expect Clemson to bounce back. But again, I'm watching what they're going to do on the offensive side of the ball. And Cade Klubnik, man, you have to play well if we're going to continue talking about Clemson being a player this year in the college football playoffs. To me, that's plain and simple. Where has the offense gone?
Yeah, Florida State doesn't have room to lose, and neither does Clemson, especially to a non-conference Appalachian State team. That'll be an interesting battle to see what happens there in Clemson, South Carolina. Last game, it's at 10 o'clock. It'll be on the Peacock Network. Boise State, who came to Georgia just last week, they beat Southern. Very impressive game there by Ashton Gentry. He's a guy that I'm going to tell you right now, if he has the same type of running game performance like he did against Southern, you're talking early Heisman favorite. I'm telling you. 20 carries, 267 yards. He averaged 13.4 yards on the ground per carry, 6 touchdowns. They kind of had a little bit of a lull in the middle of that ball game. They had scored a bunch of points, and then they needed to score a bunch because Georgia Southern came back. But Maddox Madsen also, he was 22 for 31, 280 yards for him. He had a touchdown and an interception, but very impressive Boise team ends up going to number 3 Oregon. Your thoughts?
I'm going to say this to the Oregon Ducks and Dan Lanning. Dylan Gabriel, threw for 381 yards last weekend. But you better bring your A game, man, because this is a Boise State team that proved to everybody last weekend that they can score points. As I said before, you brought up Mr. Ashton Gentry. He has that type of performance. Of course, we're going to be talking about him for the Heisman, along with Travis Hunter and along with Cam Ward, all the other great players this past college football weekend. Boise State is back to the days we know Boise State can score points when they had a young Kellen Moore under the center. This is a very good football team, and I want to give kudos to Maddox Madsen. I kind of was hard on him last week because I was trying to figure out how did he beat out Malachi Nelson, who's the #1 recruit 2 years ago, who ended up leaving USC and coming down to Boise State, and they thought he was going to be the man. But you proved to me, Mr. Madison, that you deserve that job. I'm telling you, Oregon, you cannot play against Boise State as you did against Idaho last week, or you're going to get beat up there in Eugene. This is a very good Boise State team. I'm going to say the offensive numbers again. 687 yards, 391 yards rushing, 271, I believe, in the air. They average 9 yards a play.
Yeah.
Oregon, you better be ready to play next Saturday.
Yeah. Boise does it over and over and over again. They're like the Energizer Bunny. And speaking of Energizer Bunnies, guys, make sure you put fresh batteries back in your remote control. Make sure Siri knows the next channel that you want to turn to. Make sure that you get your thumb wrapped up if you need to use that clicker, because this weekend's games are going to be exciting. Maybe not as much as last week because there was that anticipation that the season was starting. College football was underway, but now it's time to go into second gear. It's time to keep moving forward. So we want to thank you for being a part of 100 Yards of Football. For Jeremiah Long, for the professor, the burner, Vincent Turner, I'm Harper LeBel. Thank you for watching. We'll be with you again next week on 100 Yards of Football.